We are continuing after having heard that Jen was given a trial before he was put in prison for being a thief. The guards are sure to check on Jen because of what he said at his trial. There was one guard who always seemed to catch me with my head in my hands, and he always laughed. "What?" he would say. "Haven't you escaped yet?" Every time he laughed, I spat insults at him. Spitting insults at a guard. This is an example of an idiom. It is figurative language. An idiom is a common saying that does not mean what exactly the literal words say. Jen did not put an insult in his mouth and spit it from his mouth at the guard. This is the idea of when Jen said these insults, he was very rude and angry. So every time this guard laughs, Jen says an insult at him in a very angry way. It was not politic, but as always, I couldn't keep an insult in when it wanted to come out. Oh boy, that's something we all have to learn about, isn't it? Whatever I said, the guard laughed more. I ached with cold. It had been early in the spring when I had been arrested, so we find out some details. We find out when he was arrested, and we find out where. It had been early in the spring when I had been arrested and dragged out of the Shade Oak wine shop. He was arrested in a bar. Outside the prison walls, the summer's heat must have dried out the city and driven everyone indoors for afternoon naps. But the prison cells got no direct sun. And they were as damp and cold as when I first arrived. So he was arrested in the spring. It is now summer. Remember, we also got a hint back here on the first page that he's been in jail a while because he's so much thinner than when he first arrived. Now we learn it's been several months, possibly 3 months between spring and summer. I spent hours dreaming of the sunshine, the way it soaked into the city walls and made the Yellowstones hot to lean on hours after the day ended. The way it dried out water spills, that just means evaporated the water, made it turn into a gas. And the rare libations the gods still occasionally poured into the dust outside the wine shops. Libations might be a word that you're not familiar with. You should at least know something that is done to show respect for these little g gods. You might want to look it up from there. Sometimes I moved as far as my chains would let me and looked through the bars of my cell door and across the deep gallery that shaded the prison cells at the sunlight falling into the courtyard. The prison was 2 stories of cells stacked one on top of the other. I was in the upper level. Each cell opened onto the gallery, that's like a hallway. And the gallery was separated from the courtyard. That would be like if there are walls built around an open space. This would be the courtyard. So each cell opened onto a gallery, and the gallery was separated from the courtyard by stone pillars. There were no windows in the outside walls, which were 3 or 4 feet thick. Why would he be describing this in so much detail? Well, remember, he has said he is going to get out of this prison. The walls are 3 and 4 feet thick, built of massive stones that 10 men together couldn't have shifted. Legends said that the old gods had stacked them together in a day. The prison was visible from almost anywhere in the city because the city was built on a hill and the prison was at the summit. It was at the top of the hill. The only other building there was the king's home, his megaron. We wouldn't call it a megaron, we would call it a palace. In this book, the megaron is the king's castle, the king's palace. That's only in this book. That is part of what makes this book a fantasy. They made up that idea. There had also been a temple to the old gods once, but it had been destroyed, and the basilica to the new gods was built farther down the hill. Once the king's home had been a true megaron, one room with a throne and a hearth, and the prison had been the agora.